In Return of the Jedi, Luke and Vader defeat Sidious and restore peace to the galaxy. It is the ultimate conclusion to one of the most well-known stories of all time. But if we altered this slightly differently, imagine if in the final moments of the film, Luke snapped. He broke away from his moral compass of light and hope and instead fell to the depths of evil. That is today's story. What if Luke Skywalker became the Emperor? Now for him to become the Emperor, a few events need to happen. Vader and Sidious cannot be alive. I believe that the event that would ensure him collapsing to the dark side would be if he decided to murder his father on the Death Star. During their duel, Luke beats Vader with ease when he slightly taps into the dark side, pushing forward with his lightsaber and ultimately forcing him to the ground. In this moment, Luke looks at his hand and then at Vader's, realizing they are only one and the same, and if he does this, he is no better than his father or the Emperor. But what if now, instead of catching the gaze of his own hand, he simply gave into his anger, raising his emerald blade and slicing Vader across the chest, killing him. This would plunge him into a new level of darkness that he has never been at before, and he would feel power. I don't believe he would feel sadness or empathy, not yet at least. Now the Emperor remains, and Luke would deal with him accordingly. If these two were in a duel, even though Palpatine has mastered all 7 forms of lightsaber combat, he isn't beating Luke realistically. I mean, the guy is like 100 years old at this point. He would begin by firing lightning at Luke, to which the young Jedi would simply block, then charge forward, causing the Emperor to ignite his crimson blade and block. At this point, I don't even know the last time that the Emperor would have used his lightsaber. Even in the confrontation with Vader over the years, he would rely on just the Force. So being forced into a duel of skill would not help his cause either. Sidious would not last long here. He would eventually make a mistake, and Luke, charged with darkness and hatred, would kill the Emperor, taking his mantle and title for himself. Luke Skywalker was now the Emperor of the galaxy. From here, Luke would leave the Death Star before it blows up and decide what to do next. Remember, he still has his friends like Leia, Han, and Chewie, and with the destruction of the Death Star, they probably think that the Empire is over and they have won. But Luke wouldn't allow this. He has fallen to the dark side, and he desired to rule the galaxy now, to put an end to Palpatine's rule. The big question that will sort of determine this entire story is, how will Luke rule? Is he like Palpatine in the fact that it is a complete dictatorship and he wants to instill pain and calamity into others? Would Luke wish to place fear upon the star systems so that they are forced to bend the knee, otherwise they die? I am personally not sure about this. It is the complete opposite of Luke's character, even though the point of the story we are now at is also against his character. But I think his style of rule would be more welcoming, where everyone knows he is the Emperor, but they are not quivering for their life each time they are around him. He desires to instill order into the galaxy and make it so no one can challenge his rule, and he will most definitely make it clear to the galaxy the level of power that he possesses. Perhaps he would even reveal that he is the notorious Anakin Skywalker's son, the Chosen One. I think this is more realistic for Luke. After Luke kills both Vader and Palpatine, he will be forced to consolidate his power, and he would need to do this quickly, as there will be many individuals who believe they have a claim. Both high Imperial officers, but also leaders from the rebellion who believe the age of the Empire is finished. In order to ensure that his power is unchallenged, Luke would travel to Coruscant. He needs to make it clear to everyone from the get-go that he has inherited the position from Palpatine. To do this, he would stand in front of his people and display his power. This would be done by killing people who defy him to put everyone back in fear. Besides, we know Luke's force power, and if he was influenced by the dark side, this would only increase. Now as Emperor, Luke would have to maintain what Palpatine built, using his style as a blueprint, but obviously steering away from it in time, as it is not the type of leader he wishes to be. At the end of the day, he wants peace and doesn't need the people in his empire to be unhappy and hate their lives as they did under Sidious's rule. Because of this, Emperor Luke would begin to institute massive reforms into already established policies. He would restore some freedoms and rights to the people of the galaxy, ensuring that the standard of living increases so that his rule isn't completely opposed. The Imperial Senate would be reinstated but wouldn't be governed as harshly, as Luke would give some power back to the senators, though making it clear that all final decisions are run past him. Those who still rallied for the return of Palpatine would be imprisoned or exiled out of the Empire and into the unknown regions, deep in space. He truly was a strong and wise leader who did what he thought was right for the people of the galaxy. But Luke was blinded by the dark side and was nothing like the man his friends once knew and loved. He had become tyrannical, driven by the desire of power. Once he gained power, he was far too fearful to lose it, and it drove him to the brink of insanity. He would ensure that his power was so great that no one could challenge him again. However, Luke would still have a massive issue, and an issue that would almost always be a point of concern for him: his friends and family. How would Leia, Han, and Chewie react when they saw him like this? They likely wouldn't have found out for a couple of days, and even be fearful that he was on the Death Star when it blew. But when they did find out, all hell would break loose. Leia would drop to her knees in shock and disbelief. She wouldn't understand his actions and broke down in tears. Now obviously Leia's character is one grounded in the light, hope, and peace for the galaxy. It is very likely that she would go on a campaign to bring Luke back to the light. He has become the very embodiment of oppression that she has fought so hard against for so long. But it is also important to note that Luke wasn't driven by some motivating factor like Palpatine was. He was still condemned to the dark side, but in a more political and ideological sense more than anything. I can draw comparisons to Count Dooku or Baylan Skoll. They aren't necessarily the definition of evil, but draw upon the dark side for their power. For this reason, you may even see Luke with a lightsaber like Baylan's that flickers to orange from time to time. This means that Luke would welcome his friends to visit him in the Empire, to which they would protest what he is doing and his reasoning, and Luke would tell him that they cannot change his mind. He is doing this for the galaxy and for them, his friends. He realizes the oppression they were all born under and desires to create a galaxy of order so that they don't have to experience this any longer. Similar to Eren Yeager's motivations for the rumbling and attack on Titan. In the end, they would have to accept it, for there was no way to change it. Han and Chewie would get a high position in the military, where they would work tirelessly to ensure that the people of the galaxy were truly being protected and not harmed. Leia found everything far more difficult, believing that her brother had been lost to darkness forever. She fought hard in the newly reformed Imperial Senate to bring change and hope back to the galaxy, knowing for a fact that she could say anything she desired, as Luke would never harm her. After a couple of years of being Emperor, Luke's power would have reached its peak, and he would have grown to greater heights than his father ever did. His power had superseded anyone in history, and he was complete. The first large-scale opposition that Emperor Luke would have to face would be Vader's old apprentice, Starkiller. Now I know he is a Legends character and not in canon, but there aren't many canon villains to rival Luke's power, but Starkiller was extremely powerful and would pose a significant threat. I believe that he would attempt to begin a revolt similar to the rebellion, just a lot more dark. He would lead with messages that if everyone works together, they can defeat Luke and bring back peace. But Luke would ultimately beat Starkiller in combat after a long and vicious duel and restore his position as Emperor. He would reveal Starkiller as nothing but a coward and that his style of rule is perfect. He is providing protection and peace for the people in the galaxy. As with any empire, he experienced much more resistance throughout his time, with assassination attempts happening at all times. One in particular was a Sith assassin, trained in the dark side and hired to eliminate Emperor Skywalker. Her name, Mara Jade. She would sneak into his office, which was the renovated High Jedi Council chamber at the top of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. When Mara Jade confronts Luke, their intense battle would unfold and Luke's dark side proficiency would be revealed. Out of all the attempts at ridding Luke from the galaxy, Mara Jade would pose his greatest threat. She was a good adversary and made Luke have to think when he was dueling her. Though he would eventually prevail and defeat her, he was impressed and grew an attachment for her. She was gorgeous and contained all the qualities of a man like Luke searched for. Power, strength, fearlessness, everything he had longed for. As Luke and Mara continue to interact, their initial animosity slowly transforms into a deep connection that transforms their roles as Emperor and Assassin. They find themselves drawn to one another's complexities and vulnerabilities, discovering shared moments of empathy and understanding. The mutual admiration and respect for each other eventually grows and they fall in love with one another. After this moment, they didn't spend a day apart and were completely drawn to one another. Both residents of evil, morally aligned and power driven, they were perfect for each other. Eventually, Mara Jade would give birth to 3 children who became their disciples, apprentices in the Force, and they were a happy family. The most powerful family to ever step foot in the galaxy. No one could ever challenge or oppose them. They were far too strong. Luke had achieved what Palpatine desired most, complete dominance over the galaxy. Luke's connection to the dark side was not one of anger and pain, but instead a simple tool for power, one that he harnessed with control. He was everything he was meant to be. Luke Skywalker was the Emperor and the most powerful being in the galaxy. Thank you guys for watching today's video. I would love to hear your thoughts below on this analysis. I understand this story was slightly different to usual. There wasn't a clear scene-by-scene story to follow, but a more general understanding of the events that would happen, so I would love to hear your thoughts on this type of video. Luke becoming the Emperor is a cool thought, and one that George Lucas did consider. There was a period of time when Luke was going to turn to the dark side, but this didn't come into fruition. Luke wouldn't be as tyrannical and as evil as Palpatine or say Anakin if he was Emperor. Instead, he would employ an approach similar to Dooku or Baylan Skoll, sort of like a dark Jedi in that sense. Thanks again, please leave your comments below and a like on the video. May the Force be with you.